This is my silicon-based M1 2020 MacBook Pro. Boy, that's a handful. And this is my review. So I've had this MacBook for about 2 months now, and a fun fact about this whole situation is that I've actually never owned a MacBook or even used a MacBook prior to purchasing this one. And so I guess I have a fresh take on what it actually is to use a MacBook in, 2021. So this review carries a lot of weight, for me at least personally, because my time with the MacBook Pro has led me to draw to conclusions about whether or not I will be using and purchasing Apple products down the line. And so if you're interested in upgrading from an existing Apple product, or you're thinking about taking that leap from Windows, this review is for you. Now the first thing I want to talk about is build quality. And honestly, it's a nice slab of aluminium that you get. It's solid, it's sturdy, it works. Enough said. Alright, but as you might have already kind of guessed, this MacBook Pro doesn't exactly look too standard. And that's because I've applied a skin, or well, when I say I've applied a skin, what I actually meant is my sister, who is a perfectionist, helped me apply the skin. And I think it honestly turned out pretty great. And I think the reason I wanted to actually put a skin on it is because I feel like, Apple products in general, or I should say the MacBooks to be more specific, they're like Teslas. They're great pieces of technology, and they really are premium feeling. I mean, you pay a premium amount for them, so why wouldn't they be? But, the standard MacBooks, standard MacBook Pros, and the Air, for that matter, come in just 2 colors. Or I think the Air might have a few more, not too sure about that, but yeah, standard MacBook Pros, they come in 2 colors. I think they're like, one's a gray and one's a silver, and that's pretty much it. And honestly, just like the Teslas that come in, I think, a max of 3 colors, it's pretty bland. And so my recommendation, like right off the bat, if you do choose to purchase one of these, is put a skin on it. Personalize it, make it your own. It'll definitely make your whole experience with this a lot better. And if you're not a fan of just touching cold metal, then a skin will, really help with that. Now, speakers on the MacBook Pro are actually pretty solid. I mean, they're very decent. They have very decent quality. Don't get me wrong. But, they're not going to be Harman Kardon quality anytime soon. But it is good to say that they have, I think, from what I've heard from people that have actually used the last gen MacBooks, I've actually had them test this out, and they've told me that they are an improvement over the previous generation. So I guess that's a good thing. The M1 Air offers stereo speakers with wide stereo sound and a 3-mic array with directional beamforming. Now this all sounds cool, and to add to that is that the Pro is actually running a high-fidelity 6-speaker system with force-canceling woofers, wide stereo sound, and a studio-quality 3-mic array with high signal-to-noise ratio and directional beamforming. And I'd say the difference is enough to actually notice. So if you are more into sound and your audio, say you work a lot in GarageBand or something like that, definitely it is worth noting that there is a difference between the M1 Air and the M1 Pro. And one of the biggest differences, physically at least, between the MacBook 2020 and the previous generation is the number of ports. Now what you get with the 2020 MacBook Pro is a headphone jack. I mean, who would have thought, right? And 2 USB Type-C ports. And that's pretty much it. And now for some, this is going to be, a bit of a game changer since the previous generation had 4 USB Type-C ports. Me personally, I didn't really care much for USB Type-C ports anyway, and I ended up actually purchasing an adapter, which was far more useful, honestly. And again, I recommend if your workflow, depends on you connecting to a lot of external hard drives, SD cards, and things like that, definitely pick up an adapter. It'll definitely help in the long term. Now the fingerprint scanner on this MacBook is on point. What more can I possibly say? Touch ID has never been a problem. I think it's no secret that Apple's Touch ID system is industry leading. Enough said. Alright, so let's get on to the touch bar. Now the touch bar, I would say, is the MacBook's most polarizing feature. Some people either love it or they hate it. And I'd say there is a small amount that just don't really care. And for me personally, I found that the touch bar does add some convenience and utility in some scenarios. In cases where I was using Final Cut Pro or GarageBand, I found that the touch bar actually did add utility to my workflow. And I even found out recently that the entire Microsoft Office range is actually supported for use on the touch bar, which is quite interesting. This actually turned out to be true because using Excel and things like PowerPoint, you do really get some useful features using the touch bar. The Adobe product line is also supported. You can even use the touch bar to switch layers in Photoshop. And similarly, you can even edit the functionality of the touch bar yourself and make it even more useful and tailor-made for your specific case scenarios. Let's talk about software. And the first thing I want to highlight is iCloud storage. Now, I have nothing against cloud storage. I think it's the future and it's the way to go because it definitely eases up on the physical storage that you need on laptops and any other mobile device. But the way it's executed is definitely what dictates whether or not it's a hit or a miss. Now, don't get me wrong, iCloud storage is pretty useful because especially if you're in the Apple ecosystem. Now, if you have an iPad, iPhone, or a MacBook, or all three, all your data is seamlessly transferred from one device to another. It's all accessible from any device. And I like the fact that regular backups are made on each device and you can restore it from any point in that timeline on any device. So whether you have an existing iPhone that you'd like to go back in time to a different backup, you can do that. And if you're changing to a new phone, you can actually seamlessly restore all your settings. Every little change you made to your previous iPhone will automatically be made to your new iPhone. And I think, this is great. But, and there's a but, the storage space is what really interests me in this whole situation. It's tough to measure how great this feature is because, like most of Apple's services, it's a paid service. And that's not even what bothers me the most. Right off the bat, when you purchase any Apple product off the shelf and you create an Apple ID and you go through that process, you get 5 gigabytes of free cloud storage. This is absolute garbage in today's world. I could shoot 4K footage and it would be that 5 gigabytes would instantly shrink to nothing in probably less than 20 minutes. And this is the problem here. What really confuses me is how Apple has priced their paid subscription plan service, whatever you want to call it. The fact that it's $169 per month for 50 gigabytes of cloud storage is honestly the most outrageously stupid thing I've ever heard. I mean, do you really need to charge? Do you really need to squeeze $1.69 from us each month just for 50 gigabytes of cloud storage? I mean, come on, Apple. What were they possibly thinking? And even then, at least if they were going to give some free storage space, at least give us 15 gigabytes like you can get on Google Drive. I feel like that's the kind of bare minimum that we should receive. And even then, that's still a little bit too small of a storage space. And I personally feel that we should at the least get 25 gigabytes of iCloud storage for signing up with Apple and purchasing one of their devices. I mean, we are already paying a premium price for these devices. It's not like they're cheap or anything, And I feel that they should at least offer us an incentive or reward for choosing Apple products over the rest and to actually encourage us to stay within the Apple ecosystem. Let's talk about Fluidity. Now that my crazy rant's over, I want to start talking about some of the good features again. And I think Fluidity is something that's exemplified by the great UI and software optimization of this device. And I feel like that just runs across any Apple device, from the iPhone to the iPads to the MacBooks. But then again, you already know that you're going to get a great user experience with an Apple product. I mean, switching through apps is seamless. There is absolutely zero lag. And opening, Adobe products, anything, even though they actually aren't supported to run on Rosetta yet, is still quite interesting because they still boot up in less than about 7 seconds. So, on that note, Apple's just knocked this out of the park. Now, transitioning over into software, it is important to note that there will be many updates available down the line, and these are kind of updates that are necessary because there is some software incompatibility right now. And I'm hearing stories of things like Adobe products I'd say in particular crashing as it's still not supported for Rosetta. Now, I haven't found this to be a major issue, luckily, but there are people I know who are having these issues, so it is worth noting that you may find problems with apps that are not compatible with the software as of now. So what do I mean by this? Well, most of the apps you will download may be for the Intel-based versions of the MacBook. And now this is a problem as these are M1 chips, not Intel-based. And so there will be a bit of time necessary to kind of optimize it for the M1 chips. It's not a huge issue, well, for me at least, but it's one issue that will be fixed down the line. All right, so what was my overall experience like? Well, I think I want to highlight the touch bar because learning to kind of make use of this touch bar and actually kind of use it to its fullest extent was quite an interesting experience. You know, it takes a lot of mapping and kind of editing and tweaking to get it right on each individual app. And if you're not a fan of that, well, you may not really find the touch bar as useful as it could be. Also, kind of learning to get used to the different shortcut commands. You know, these are just small things that I'm nitpicking about, but I think it's still important to know, you know, especially coming from a Windows device. Prior to purchasing this Mac, things like Control-C is now Command-C and all that kind of stuff. So not a big deal. You can learn it. I'd say that, you know, the trackpad gestures were something I found quite interesting and useful. You know, pinching to go into your apps or using two fingers sliding across the trackpad to see your kind of notifications, things like that. And the cool thing about this is because I now have an iPhone as well, you know, you're always up to date because any messages you get show up on your MacBook, and it's nice. The ecosystem is nice. And I can see why some people who kind of get sucked into this ecosystem, they never want to leave. And moving on to typing, you know, typing, I would say I'm just glad that they kept improving their keyboards because there was that whole fiasco with the butterfly switch mechanism that kept failing on the 2016 to 2019 or 2017 models. I'm not too sure, but yeah, there were a whole bunch of MacBook Pros that the keyboards were absolute garbage. So I'm glad that there aren't any crazy reports of keyboards malfunctioning as of now. So let's just hope it stays that way. All right, so the final verdict. If I was to give this MacBook a final score out of 10, what would it be? I think I would, and the answer to that is I would give it a solid 8 out of 10. You know, there are a few things that this MacBook could definitely improve on. You know, maybe having a few more ports that are actually useful so that you don't have to keep buying adapters. You know, the Rosetta 2, you know, there's some incompatibility with software that could definitely be improved. The touch bar is okay. The build quality is good. But yeah, it's just iCloud. I find that whole situation kind of crazy. But yeah, overall, it's a good laptop. I could definitely recommend it. And I'm going to say something that is quite contrary of what other people are saying. Even though you might be pressed or hard-pressed to get the MacBook Air, I would highly suggest you pick up the MacBook Pro. The Air is great, but the MacBook Pro is just that much better. And I feel like since you are investing heavily into these products, it would make sense to invest in the better product of the two, as it would be more beneficial in the long run. And last but not least, the keyboard. Yeah, it works. It's not the best keyboard and doesn't have the best travel and not as clicky as I would like it, but it works. So that's been this review. My name is Prashil. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.